wicked Felina. I'm Felina. What happened? I should name this series What Happened, because I'm going to tell you what happened. How did the Republican Party switch to the KKK? When the Democratic Party was the party of the KKK, Republican Party was formed as the party of abolition. And, you know, slave traders, slave owners, North and South. North and South was not entirely a Southern thing. It was actually North and South. You know, people want to keep slavery in the North as well. But Republican Party was against it, you know. But anyway, so now when did they switch? Now, I'll tell you what happened. Well, Black people didn't start, or minorities, Black people, because minorities were Black people in the 60s. They really start voting in the 60s for the Democratic Party? No, in fact not. It was during the 30s under FDR. FDR, the one that made a deal with this KKK member. They didn't, under Jim Crow, like they didn't want to stop lynching Blacks. But he goes, look, I want you to sign my little, one of this piece of legislation, you know, passed. And he said, okay, well, if you don't abolish that, do anything about lynching, then, you know. So anyway, and then he appointed that open member of the KKK, the Supreme Court. So there's your Democrat and your New Deal. So they offered all these little, this New Deal, and brought a lot of Black people into the Democratic Party from the party of abolition. The Democratic Party was in power. They had the money. You know, people who were KKK at the time had a lot of money and a lot of power. And so they offered a lot of free stuff and jobs, and so they got them to come over. So that's actually what happened. And reluctantly they came over. So actually, so it really didn't happen in the 60s. It's interesting. You got JFK, who kind of, he admired Hitler, went over to visit him. It's really funny, this whole thing, Democrats, Nazis, all that stuff. Oh, and, you know, as I said before, FDR loved fascism. Fascism, Nazi Party, National Socialist Workers' Party, Socialist Work. That's really communism. There's really communism in the middle with nationalism attached to it. So you love your goddamn communism. Anyway, and then you've got LBJ, who said, we're going to offer them welfare and destroy the whole Black community. Basically, he destroyed the whole Black community because of welfare. Because he said, you know, the father can't be in the home. So the whole thing switched. You know, it used to be that white people used to have the majority of pregnancies out of wedlock. And Black people was like 90% in wedlock. And, you know, going to church, you know, a great deal of them just were spiritual and working and moving towards the future, and they offered, you know, basically welfare and bad education and bad living conditions, and kind of destroyed the whole. So they've got a right to be angry, but these cities have been run by Democrats for the past 60 years, because, you know, it's like, the Republicans are going to take all this, you know, you're dependent on us, and you know that, you know, we're not going to fix your school, so you're going to have a better life. So, you know, you vote for Republicans, they're going to take everything away from you. So it's an interesting plantation that's going on there. Really sad. Anyway, we should fix that, by the way. We really should, if we really care. But anyway, I don't know if we do. At least I do. Anyway, so LBJ said we're going to have these, you know, with the whole welfare thing, voting, blank word. I'm not going to say the word or even the letter, because that's atrocious, and it's always been atrocious not to say a thing. It's the name of the devil is easier to say than that word. That's how bad that word is. Voting for us for the next 200 years. Basically, it's a handout to get them voting for. So that's interesting. So how did this happen? Well, it's this guide, the 60s, and you got your whole LSD, and you got your pot smoking, and your hippies. Well, Herbert Marcuse came over from the Frankel School to instill communism into the young people of America. You know, remember Khrushchev? Who pounded his shoe on the table, said that we will destroy your country without a shot, because they infiltrated America, and they have, haven't they? Revolution, definitely. Well, anyway, so getting back to Frankel School, Urban McHugh. So basically, you got these doped up hippies, and he says to them, you know, here's the reality of the KKK, and here's the people who were in party with the Nazis. So the Nazis fell out of favor because Hitler gave them a bad name. So we've got to pretend we're not Nazis. Okay, so anyway, you watch my other videos. I don't get into it. Anyway, so he basically said, this is what he said to them: right-wing bad, Republican, right-wing, left-wing good, Democrat, right-wing. So they could understand that, because it's really simple when you're on drugs. You know, the simpler things you can understand. So basically, you know, convincing these people of that, who became our future teachers, and destroyed the minds of the young people, and said, ooh, pot is really good for the brain. Anyway, basically, it was like shooting fish in a barrel. You know, it wasn't hard to convince bullshit like that to these people. That's why the 80% of the young people today don't know that communism is not a utopia. Well, let's get into what exactly happened one day, because we've got this whole list. You know, it's like Trump is the Nazi. This is like, oh, hyper Nazi, the guy who had his mother died in a Jewish nursing home. And because you hate Ben Shapiro, you call him a white supremacist. His family was turned into ashes by the Nazis. None of them exist. And you're calling him a white... He's the victim of Nazism, and you're calling him the white supremacist, and you're protesting him. He's the victim of the Nazis. His family are the victim. You guys are freaking nuts. Well, anyway, let's get back to Trump. And he had his mother lived out her life in a Jewish nursing home. Okay, what Nazi would freaking do that? He loved his mother. His daughter converted to Judaism. Jewish grandchildren. His son-in-law, Orthodox Jew. They're all Orthodox Jews. Nazi ended segregation in Florida, in Palm Beach. You know, because they wouldn't allow, you know, Kennedys have a home there, and didn't do any freaking thing about it. And basically, if you were Black or Jewish or Hispanic or Muslim or anything, you could not attend a resort in Palm Beach. 1998, segregation still existed. Did any Democrats or the Kennedys say, oh, we got to stop this? No, the Democrats didn't say a thing, because Democrats really, really don't like, I don't really think they like minorities. They just want the votes. Okay, let's get real here. So, you know, a politician would simply have, yeah, I'll tell you how things switch, by the way. Anyway, Republican, what really happened, what really happened. Anyway, so, you know, politician would ask you for tons and tons of money. And, oh, well, get me elected and give me, oh, I need more money. You know, I'm elected, but yeah, oh, you know, it's the Republicans that are fighting me. You know, it would take forever for this to get done. Trump just said, hey, I want minorities to come to my resort. Bullshit on you. And I'll sue the city for $75 million. And he won. Ended segregation single-handedly. So, come on. The guy was given an award by Jesse Jackson and frickin' Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton for hiring more minorities than any other employer and promoting them. Minorities that were not, like, just people at street smarts. He didn't demand it, and promoted them, and women, than anybody. So he's like, give me a sorry. So this guy who's the New York Democrat, I mean, he's New York, I mean, Democrat voted for everybody, but gave money to Democrats, for God's sakes. A New Yorker, and he's the biggest member of the KKK and the Nazi Party, when he's got a homeless Black woman living up in Trump Towers. I mean, she snuck up there, and they were going to throw her out, and they called Trump, and he said, let her stay. She's been living there for almost 10 years before it was in to have, you know, the Democrats, let's elect a Black president, before it was even in. She lives up there 3 meals a day, flowers every day, healthcare taken care of. She looks over Central Park. In apartments like $100 million. This poor homeless woman. Yeah, he took care of the homeless people. I mean, it's like, well, anyway, when did it, okay, so Trump is the worst. He's the most evil, and you're out there, the Democrats, you know, the Republicans are the evil people, and the Democrats are holding up bloody heads and stabbing the president on stage, and you know, the tried to kill Steve Scalise, and all the Republicans was a Bernie voter, and you know, videos shooting the presidents and blood all over the place. But really, because you got to stop the Trump voters, because they're the ones going crazy with the revolution, wanting to kill out on the streets, trying to kill Democrats and punching elderly people in the face. I mean, come on, you know, really, because you've got to stop them, because they're just going crazy. Anyway, so this one's the worst. But before that, it was Romney. Romney was, he's a Mormon. He's a member of the KKK. He is a Nazi. Before that, it was Bush. He was the most evil person. In fact, for 8 years, Obama blamed him for everything that went wrong, everything that he couldn't fix, even with his pen and his phone. He took the power away. Separation of powers, what we have. That's what capitalism, separation of powers. You have a dictator on top, some crazy person on top. You have a separation of powers, so you check, the powers are checked. So you don't have a dictator, somebody that usurps power, which Trump kind of wants to keep. He's trying to work within the system, but nobody wants to work with him because he doesn't want to be a dictator. But anyway, so Bush was the most evil person in the world, and he was ill until Trump came along. He was the Nazi. He was evil. You could say all the bad things and all the horrible things you could about him. So he gets up the other day and he basically denounces Trump as evil. That way everybody can start liking him, because everybody hated Bush. So everybody can start liking him again before he dies. You know, he's kind of probably losing his mind now. It's like, you know, like, come on, this is such a game. I'm sure Obama was sitting on Barbara Bush's lap after the election. They're all freaking friends. They hate Trump because he's an outsider. They hate Trump because he's actually the revolutionary, for God's sakes. That's why the Republicans hate Trump. You know, you stepped over us to get to the top. This, you know, you just walked into the presidency, and we used people and got a lot of money. And they're billionaires now. They're all billionaires. Come on. Okay, so before that, it was Reagan that was the Nazi, and was Hitler. It was Hitler and the KKK member. Okay, so I'm trying to find when the Republicans actually did change, other than transference, where, as you know, the people who are actually the members of the KKK, like the preacher who screams and yells from the pulpit about adultery and sin and drugs, and then you find out that he's the one that's doing it. You know, Freud called that transference. It's actually the racist Democrats that basically have to scream and yell. So you look at the Republicans, because they're the ones that are really doing it, and you're not going to get the minorities to vote for you if if they find out that you're really the racist. So see, this is what happened. Well, one day, this is what I was told. See, one day, the senators were sitting in the Senate, and the congressmen were sitting in the House. They're sitting there. And then all the Democrats were sitting there in their hoods and their robes. And then the Republicans were sitting there in their golf caps and their bowlers. And they looked at each other, and they said, hey, this KKK members in their hoods and their running. It must have been a wonderful sight. So anyway, so they looked at, or maybe they were in a steam bath. I heard another version. They were in a steam bath together. They just all love each other. Because they do. They love each other. Anyway, they said, hey, let's all switch hats. So they did. But what happened was it didn't quite work out right away, because when the Republicans, they said, I'll take your hood. And they took the bowlers and the golf caps and put the hood on and said, wait, I can't see out of the eyes. You know, your head is bigger than mine. And, your face kind of, it's like, it doesn't fit quite right. Your head is square, my head is oval. And it's like, so basically then the women, they had to get lots of white sheets. They had to sew. That's what the women did back then. They sewed. They had to sew new hoods, and they had to cut out new eyes, and they had to take the bowlers and the golf caps. I think they put some felt around the inside, so it would stay on their heads. So that's how it changed. That's what I heard, and I think it's true. So anyway, that's what happened. That's what happened.